François. Vous m'entendez?
Okay, we are starting. Dear colleagues, it is 11 o'clock here in Turin, in Italy, and we are starting our webinar on graduate tracking experience from Morocco and the Netherlands. Welcome to all. Please note that today we have simultaneous interpretation available, so in English and French. So before we start, please select the language of your preference from the interpretation button on your lower panel. So you can either select English or French. I will give you a few seconds to do it, and then we will continue. Okay, so I hope you managed to do it, and you are hearing me either in English and in French now. In case you have a problem or a question, please use the chat, and my colleagues will respond to you. So we are greeting you from the European Training Foundation premises here in Turin. I am saying we because together with me, there are colleagues in the same room and in other offices, but we are at a safe physical distance, let's say, but we are together. So my name is Nadezhda, and I am a part of the ETF Quality Assurance team, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Just before starting, let me remind you on some technical rules of the game today. Please note that our webinar is being recorded. You have been informed about it when you registered, and you have all given your consent to it. The recording will be used by ETF or will be disseminated by ETF for our communication purposes. In case you do not agree with the dissemination issue, you can just switch off your video and audio and continue following the webinar this way. So I hope this is clear. So we are kindly asking all of you to mute your microphones now that you are not speaking, so that there is no interference. And throughout the webinar, we are inviting you to use the chat for your questions, for your comments, or requests for clarifications. We will take your questions during the Q&A sessions during the webinar. In case some questions will remain unanswered, do not worry. We will answer, or our speakers will answer to these questions on the ETF Open Space, our thematic platform. So don't worry, nothing will remain without an answer. So please use the chat. You can write either in English or in French. I hope that everything is clear and working. I hope that you hear me. So I'm now happy to pass the floor to my colleague, Xavier Mateo de Cortada, for information and for introduction on the Quality Assurance Forum. So Xavier, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. Good morning, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. I welcome very much to this new meeting, webinar on the Quality Assurance Forum. This is already the third year that the forum has activities, and of course this year we could not organize the activities as initially planned to have policy peer learning and peer review activities to the countries due to the coronavirus crisis, of course. but we are trying to do it online, and I hope this is an alternative way of reaching similarly the objectives that were planned, of course not in exactly the same way, but also trying to do it in a time-effective way. The forum, of course, was, you know very well, was created as a platform to support the different countries participating, to share information, learn one from another, and create knowledge together on this issue of quality assurance. This is very much in line with what we have now as objectives for our strategy in the coming years, where we want to, the ETF wants to develop, become kind of a reference in the issues of human capital development. And by developing a knowledge hub, what we call a knowledge hub. And in this knowledge hub, one of the things we want to do is to co-create knowledge together with the experts in the countries, the experts in the European Union member states, and also in international organizations, and to do it in a way that we work in networks, in partnership, so we can learn from one to another and to share our knowledge and also discuss that even globally. So this is activity today is very much in line with this strategy that we want to, is the type of work we want to do in the future. For this year, we plan to start working already with an increased number of countries due to the coronavirus crisis. We decided to postpone to next year, hopefully for next year. There we want to expand the network to countries in other countries with whom the ETF is working. The topic today of learners tracking is a very important one, because it is a way of understanding what is the outcome, the effect of the learning processes of students in the VET systems. Where are they after some periods, or how has gone their integration into the labor market? What are the things that we should change from our learning system at the light of the information of what people are doing when they finish the different studies? So I think it is a very interesting topic, and we have two countries to help us to understand better the topic, and also where we can give also our views from each country. So these countries are Morocco and the Netherlands. And I will now want to wish you a very interesting webinar today. And I will pass now over to Munir to make the presentation of the event today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xavier. Welcome all to this webinar, and special welcome to the forum members. As far as I can see, we have members from different countries, of course, from Morocco, Khair Mahmoudi, from Tunisia, Faisal, from Bosnia-Herzegovina, Liliana, Ivan Markovic from Montenegro. I've seen as well Zoran from North Macedonia. I've seen as well Asaf from Israel, Shirin from Palestine, and Kadir from Turkey, and many others. So welcome to all of you, and special welcome to the forum members. Before taking you through the topic and through the agenda, I would like as well to present the ETF Quality Assurance team. So it is composed of myself. I'm facilitating, moderating the Quality Assurance Forum, and as well from Nadezhda that you've seen this morning introducing the forum. And you will see the third member of this team later today. She will present the outcomes of a mapping on the use of indicators. Her name is Eva Yansova. The three of us are experts on quality assurance, but we are not that experts on Zoom and on organizing webinars. So we benefited from the support of another colleague who's Chiara Margaglioni, and I would like to thank her very much as well for the technical support she provided. Now on the topic. It should be clear that when we talk about quality assurance, we look at measures. So we are looking at the tracking systems from the point of view of how do we measure, whether we measure and how do we measure the employment of graduates. And if we measure that, what do you do with the outcomes of that? So if we have studies on the employment, do you use them to adjust training needs? Do you use them to inform future learners and use them to revise curricula, revise qualifications? So we look at the tracking system from that perspective. We are not going to talk about technicalities of organizing tracking systems. This is not our topic, and this is not our expertise. What we are looking at is as a measure of looking at how graduates are performing in the labor market. Are they satisfied? Are employers satisfied? And if not, or if yes, how do we do with that result? How we feedback the training system as a whole. So this is about the topic. Now in the agenda, you may have it in front of you, but maybe Nadezhda, could you share the agenda on the screen? Would it be possible? Great. So after this short introduction, we will have a presentation of the tracking system in Morocco. Actually, we will have one presentation from Ruqayya Al-Mahmoudi, who's from the Ministry of from the Department of Vet within the Ministry of Education. And Ruqayya is the national contact person of Morocco in the forum. So she will present the system, and we will have after that two testimonies, one from the Ministry of Tourism, which is a training provider, and a second one from the National Vet Agency in Morocco called OFPPT, which is the biggest, largest public training provider in Morocco. So we'll see from these two providers, how do they use the outcomes of the tracking systems to adjust training needs. We will have a session on quality and answer, questions and answers. Then we will break for 5 minutes. We've called it coffee break, up to you to decide what to do in these 5 minutes. But for sure, we will not offer coffee. After that, we will resume, and we will have, before the presentation, we will have a poll. So we'll ask you a couple of questions on what's happening in your countries, whether you have or not tracking system, whether you use the outcomes or not. So it will be very short, it will take maximum 2 minutes. Then we will have a presentation from the Netherlands. So our colleague Herman Scholten from the Ministry of Education on the Netherlands will share with us the experience of the Netherlands on carrying out tracking systems and how they use the outcomes of these studies. And the session will be moderated by our international expert who has been supporting us in organizing this series of webinars, Keith Bramford. Then we will have, of course, a session on quality question and answer. Then we will have a short presentation from the third member of the team, who's Eva Yansova. And Eva will take us through the result of a mapping on the use of indicators that has been carried out within the ETF forum with the forum members. So we were asking them whether they collect data, what they do with data, what are the problems they are facing in using the results of data. So she will share with you the results of this mapping, and as well she will interpret the results of the poll. Then we will have concluding remark from our expert, Keith Bramford. So this is for the agenda this morning. As you can see, it's quite dense agenda. We have, I would say, a lengthy morning for this webinar. So I would kindly ask the presenters to keep on time, and we will not hesitate to ask them to shorten or to cut their presentation if they go beyond the allocated time. So that's it, and without any delay, I would pass the floor to Ruqayya Al-Mahmoudi from Morocco to take us through the tracking system in Morocco and how or not, what problems they are facing in using the results of these tracking systems. So Ruqayya, the floor is yours.
Donc, bonjour tout le monde. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
D'accord. Je suis Riya El Mahmoudi, chef de la
I am
division
Rikia El Malmoudi,
de l'évaluation
and I
de
come
l'évaluation
from the Vocational Training Department at the Ministry of Education Vocational Training in Morocco.
des forums
And
assurance
I
qualité
am
pour le
member
Je suis la
of
coordinatrice de l'équipe
the
référente
Forum for Quality Assurance in VET. And I am very glad that we took part in this forum, and I am happy to share the experiences.
Je vais vous faire une présentation assez
I
résumée.
will deliver a summed up presentation starting with an overview on our system in Morocco. I will then be talking about the assessment in vocational training system in my country. Then we'll analyze external performance evaluation together with the training and vocational training in Morocco with the indicators, product indicators, and how we use the results of these evaluation, how there is room for improvement. And then we're going to explore two testimonials, one from the Vocational Training and Employment Promotion Office and for the Tourism Department to see the results and their opinions on how to improve. So as to start, this is a single ministry that manages all the education training components, so vocational training, higher education. So we have a system orientation so that it is a choice. And this helps us to visualize the efforts and the different components of the method. And the ministry drafts the governmental strategies, implements these strategies and their evaluation. The ministry does not have vocational training centers that are directly run. There are 10 operators, but they run the vocational training centers. They are public operators, in particular EFPPP, and the ministerial departments, the authorities, delegated institutions that are run by professionals so as to improve skills matching, and private institutions as well as NGOs operating in particular in learn by doing. We have different systems, so we have alternance as well as presential. It is more classic, and then one that should be set mainly in enterprises. We have training devoted to people with difficulties of insertion, and then we have continuous training that encourages the social professional promotion of workers and tries and increases their productivity of enterprises. In terms of figures, so we have 2,084 vocational training institutions. We have 350 different sectors and regions. We have a participation rate corresponding to 2.3 candidates per training place. We have over 20,000 trainers. For this year, we have had almost 400,000 trainees. And then we have had almost 200,000 graduates. I will move on now to the assessment in the vocational training system. Our evaluation of the internal performance is based on the production and monitoring of indicators produced on an ongoing basis. This comes from the evaluation of private vocational training sectors. We analyze sectors, regions. We have evaluation devoted to private training institutions, assessing them with adequacy of pre-established regulation. That has also to do with accreditation of establishments in order to enable them to implement plans that are recognized by the state. We also insist on self-assessment of the establishments. This for the benefit of all private and public operators. We're setting this up and we're already asking that. We're setting this up for all the establishment, for all the institutions. And then we have the external performance of vocational training, the evaluation of external performance. We have surveys on the graduate integration, on competitivity and productivity. And then, of course, the external performance, which is the object of today's webinar. So in the evaluation of external performance of the vocational training, we have this measurement in place since 1987. It is based on 3 tools of national scope. There is a survey testing 9 months after graduation, so verifying the conditions of unemployment. Then we have a survey covering 36 months after graduation and completes the first survey. We're interested in the professional career, in the improvement of working conditions, and their insertion. And in 2016, we introduced a third tool, which is the employer satisfaction survey. So as not to go over too much detail of these surveys, know that we choose a sample that should be representative, and then we carry out an analysis. So 2002 to 2005, we moved from a postal survey to direct interviews, of the selected number of sectors. And then with 2006, we had direct interview surveys of all training sectors. We can also interview parents and the families of graduates to have information about the conditions of their children, to know whether they are employed or not. So up to 2015, we have adopted 2 separate surveys, one for the survey 9 months after graduation and one for the surveys 36 months afterwards. And then we've had 2 samples that are used 9 months and then 36 months. In 2016, we have had the support of the French Development Agency, and we introduced some rectifications to the notion of panelization of surveys. So it is a cycle of 3 years. So the novelty is that these surveys work on the same sample for the same kind of promotion. So it's the same sample that is being tested for 2 different passages. So we have increased the participation rate to the service up to 15%. And we have set up an quality insurance mechanism for carrying out these surveys. For the entire system of collection of data in terms of recruitment and staff training. We have adopted a policy of enrichment of these mechanisms with quality assurance systems that are complementary studies in order to enrich these studies. by targeting qualitative studies, analysis of the access to training and the school career before entering vocational training that can have an influence on the quality of the products and can influence the quality of vocational insertion. Therefore, we analyze what the graduate's problem might be, what the different choices of graduates might be, so as to encourage entrepreneurship and the relation between employment and training. And then about the professional mobility at the national and international level, and also an assessment with employers. These three surveys lead to a guideline in terms of indicators. They are divided by gender, by region, by operators, by types of sector. So we can find the several aspects, and they are here analyzed and listed by indicators, so indicating the inactivity rate, the employment rate, the unemployment rate, integration rate. Another important aspect concerns the working conditions. For example, salaried status or family assistance status. Is it a permanent condition they have? Is it occasional or seasonal work? Is it a permanent or fixed-term contract or temporary contract? What is the average number of hours worked? What are the working conditions, therefore? And then adequacy of job training, which analyzes the assessment of integrated graduates concerning the suitability of the training in terms of context, the employer's assessment of the preparation of the graduate for the job. Are these graduates operational starting from the very beginning when they get out of vocational training or training? Is there difficulty in adapting to certain requirements or technical skills, for example? And then there is the theme of self-employment. We look for the number of the proportions of graduates who plan to set up their own business. What are the difficulties that they might have encountered? What are the governmental problems? For these indicators, I've summed up just the main aspects. If you want to see the detail, you can have a look at the end of the presentation. There are 2 slides. The last 2 slides of my presentations list all the indicators in detail. Now, having said that we have a system that we have in place since the 1980s, providing lots of information on the improvement of this method, we can see what we do with these data that we get from these surveys. So for the use, know that it depends on the user. At this strategic level, it is the Ministry of Vocational Training that uses them and does cross-referencing with other data for the development of the government's vocational training strategy. We have the results that the promotion on the job training have a high integration rate. So that is in line with the
d'accueil de notre dispositif dans ces 2 modes de formation. Un autre exemple qui est concret, c'est la feuille de route. C'est notre feuille de route actuelle validée par le roi et qui donne une importance très accru au dispositif de la formation professionnelle. Pour chaque région et dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre.
Rakia, I'm sorry, may I interrupt you?
We have-
May I interrupt you for a second? We didn't have interpretation for maybe 1 minute. Yeah?
Yes, I'm here. Okay,
Okay.
I can keep going. Okay.
Okay, maybe.
Can you hear the
okay.
interpretation? Can you hear the interpretation now?
Now, yes. Maybe I will ask Rakia just to repeat her last statements, you know, the last maybe 30 seconds.
Hein?
Thank you.
D'accord, d'accord. Est-ce que je reviens à ce slide?
Go back to the previous slide. I can restart with the slide.
Vraiment les 30 dernières secondes.
No, just the last 30 seconds.
Après la feuille de route.
D'accord. Ok, ok. Donc, c'était en vous présentant les utilisations des résultats de l'insertion.
So I was saying the results of this data for planning. We said that it depends on the users and also employer satisfaction to plan other training. Therefore, I provided the example of the 2021 strategy and the example of the roadmap consisting in the creation of a competencies chart in certain regions and guidelines that are promising in terms of insertion, and we have known them through insertion studies. So for each region, we have a supply chain where we know we need to work. Therefore, we use the results for the implementation for drafting contents of the vocational training. We use these results in order to assess the matching and to validate the elements of vocational training. So for the Higher Education Council, which is an organ in charge, they use these results of the surveys in order to evaluate the strategic objectives and to propose orientation and guidelines. For the operators, we have about 2 operators, training providers. We will hear the testimonials. We have the High Commission for Planning, which is a very important institution in Morocco. They do cross-referencing of the indicators to guide the drafting of policies in terms of choice of the most favorable training to insertion of the youth. And then there is an agency dealing with vulnerable populations. They use these results to explore the needs of people with special needs, for example, people living in rural areas, to improve equality and equity, and to propose measures to promote employment of these categories. And for the young people who are addressing vocational training, it helps their choice in promising pathways. So we have presented this system. Is it a perfect system that we have? Of course, it's not perfect. We hope we are going to be able to improve it. So, for example, we have weaknesses concerning the poor use and analysis of the data. For example, the coverage of different components of the system or data. We still do not have a strategic integrated planning, institutionalized, where all these results are used automatically in a framework, providing for the creation of a group, a teamwork for analyzing these results. We need to improve also these targeted quality studies, and then we're improving also the research themes with a new range of indicators. And then we need a communication plan adapted to the system. We want to attract the attention to this variety and this richness of data so that analyzers are able to provide these data and facts to decision makers. And for a general conclusion, I can say that the training system operates according to the 4 phases of quality assurance. First of all, planning, analyzing the labor market, observatories, needs, sectoral studies, and then job streets directory and job skills repositories. We use a methodological framework for drawing up and implementing programs. We check, so the evaluation system, however, is not so rich. And the evaluation of the integration of graduates. What we are lacking in our system is only the readjustment phase, hence the enormous potential, so the ACT phase. We have a potential that has not been expressed yet. So for the monitoring of the integration of graduates. So with this, I will conclude, and thank you very much for your attention. I will like to give the floor to my colleagues.
Est-ce que je donne la parole à mes collègues? Je n'entends pas.
Si, vas-y, vas-y.
I'm giving the floor to my colleagues. I cannot hear them.
Yes, please. Mustafa and Zainab.
Oui, allez-y.
On va donner la parole à Zineb.
À moi, d'accord.
D'accord.
D'accord, merci. S'il fait la qui veut fermer la fenêtre. Alors, bonjour mesdames et messieurs.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, yes, we do.
Yes, we can hear you very well. I am Zaina Hashim Idrissi, Director of the Agency for Vocational Training and Work Promotion.
De l'équipe Assurance Qualité
I
au
am
Maroc.
member of the Quality Assurance team in Morocco. First of all, I would like to thank for the invitation to this webinar to provide you with an overview of our tracer studies and to improve the quality of our training. I will start with my presentation. So as you see, for the OFPPT, quality is absolute key, and this entails a quality step which has to do with the quality approach and is really key for the insertion of graduates. So our steps are the following, as you can see before you. So first of all, the comprehension of the social environment and the follow-up of the insertion of graduate with the quality controls, as well as our orientation. OIF PPT is a steering committee for the quality studies, as already mentioned by Ms. Helmamoudi. This enables us to analyze by sector, by gender, by supply chain, to verify the degree of matching. These enables us to use this data for decision making to our offers of training in our context. And after the tracer studies and after these analysis carried out, 70% of graduates have mentioned the insertion, and 80% were satisfied after the training received. In fact, our quality steps rely mainly on the proximity with enterprises and vocational training institutes, which enables the adaptation of our offer of training to the needs of enterprises, the restructuring of our offer through the creation of new supply chains and outdating of all the supply chains, and the updating of programs, which of course strengthens the employability of graduates. This thanks to the different types of studies, tracer studies and studies drafted by OFPPT in the framework of the upgrading and revamping of our situation. Would you please move on to the next slide? As you can see here, we have the tracing and the overview of the structure. Each restructuring is anticipated by data collection and analysis of the labor market, together with the analysis of the labor situation, so as to analyze the competencies to be developed, to be acquired, or cross-cut skills, general skills. They can be general soft skill or specific. So after a pilot experience with a qualifying training, we carry out an assessment which enables the restructuring. I will present as an example the training projects caregivers concerning setting up of services for the community, providing new dimension with a social focus, with a strong potential of employment at the national and international level. As mentioned in the slide, in order to implement this project, we drafted two studies. One was sectoral on the potential market in Morocco, on 7 defined trades, on professions, and a study on different existing and emerging forms of atypical work for the community care employments. And after these two studies, we have defined 4 pathways for supply chains for the production of training programs, so normally related to services for the community. And after this pilot training year that started in July 2020, we carried out a study on the satisfaction and integration of the study among a sample after the end of the pilot experience. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
J'entends pas bien.
I cannot hear you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Merci à vous. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mustafa? Mustafa?
We don't hear you. The microphone, please.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very glad to be here with you today. My name is Mustafa Tariq Elawi, and I work at the Ministry of Tourism and Transport, Handicrafts and Social Economy of Morocco. So knowing that the graduates' employment is a main concern for the tourist department, this department has set up a series of mechanisms in order to help the insertion of young graduates and the creations of career path studies, the improvement of cross-disciplinary and general skills.
À savoir l'arrêt de formation afin de mettre en adéquation les formations
in order to match skills with the requirements of the sector, setting up partnerships for the enrichment of the training offer, the organizations of recruitment sessions in partnership with the sector.
Okay, we have some interruptions, unfortunately. Okay, okay now.
En ce qui concerne le suivi d'insertion des
As
lauréats,
far as the insertion follow-up of graduates, it is important to concern the approach of partners in tourism, to know about the insertion of graduates. That is why the tourist department has set up a follow-up mechanism. The connection froze.
l'insertion des jeunes et d'avoir une quote à l'adéquation de l'offre de formation aux besoins des professionnels du secteur. Et ce via la collecte et le traitement des données issues de l'ensemble de ces établissements portant sur l'estimation des effectifs des lauréats insérés chaque année.
Mustafa, just a second. We had an interruption and maybe the last 15 seconds without translation. I'm now checking if translation is back.
Translation is back. It's
okay, great, great. Mustafa, could you just go back 15 seconds back, just to repeat what you have said?
Okay. Donc, comme je l'avais dit, pour le
As I was saying, for the department, set up a system to validate the strategies and to have a better visibility for the matching with the professionals of the sectors. First of all, with the collection and processing of data for the main agencies of tourism, and the data analysis and provision of indicators to tracers studies, steered by the Department of Vocational Training. Therefore, in order to have a better coordination after each study, we carry out a specific analysis of these indicators by region, by province, by level. So these studies define several aspects in the regions, and this is certainly very important for our general programs. And so in the opposite case, when the insertion rate of a certain region is known, we can analyze the other aspects of the labor market. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Rakia, Zainab, Mustafa, for such a complete presentation, for sharing the perspective at the system level, but also at the providers level. Now I would like to reach out to my colleagues, Eva and Munir, to check if we have questions from our participants. Over to you, Munir and Eva.
Thank you, Nadia. Yes, indeed, we have collected several questions for our presenters. So I will try to present them one by one and will give you the time to respond. So first question is a more technical one. So are surveys or the tracer study surveys carried out by schools, or in general, what is the role of the schools within the fieldwork or the implementation of the surveys? Who would like to respond? Maybe Rakia.
Oui.
Thank you.
Est-ce qu'on répond question par question?
Yes, you can go ahead. You can go ahead to respond to this question, and I will then ask another one.
Donc, si j'ai bien compris, c'est le rôle des établissements dans les enquêtes d'insertion et de cheminement. En fait, on n'arrive pas au niveau établissement.
Just a second. No, there is no translation.
Oui.
Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear now. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Rakia. Thank you. Okay.
For the role of the establishment in insertion and tracer studies, they provide especially the data of graduates who are being surveyed, and they facilitate the access and the contact of these graduates. This is not yet at the level of approaching the graduates for each sector, but for the effective sector, for the effective number. Let's say that this refers more to the trainers level or the trainers region.
Thank you. Then I have a also related question. Do you expect that specific providers are to, let's say, implement corrective measures if you see, for example, poor results in specific, for example, domains, specific sectors? And if so, do you provide some support measures for such providers or sectors? Or do you plan to do it in the future?
C'est-à-dire, si les résultats
Well,
d'insertion...
it means whether the results are highlighting some aspects that really require adjustment on vocational training. It is the operators who will take this type of initiative to set these adjustments up. But then, otherwise it would be the ministry adopting strategies and mechanisms, supporting, of course, the work of the trainers operators.
Thank you. Then I have another question from Lebanon, I believe. It's on the implementation of the employer satisfaction survey. How often do you run this survey? Is it on yearly basis?
De toutes les façons, et pour les études d'insertion...
At any rate, for both the studies, traces studies and insertion studies, we carry them out annually for the promotion of employment. And for each type of promotion, we carry out a survey. We do it, for example, for promotion on a yearly basis or 9 months after the training. In 2020, we have carried out a second phase. So it's basically not necessarily on an annual basis, even if we do, but it's adjusted according to the type of promotion that we do.
Thank you. Then I would ask Munir if he could present questions from the French-speaking colleagues. To you, Munir.
Sure, and it will be in French. En fait, c'était une question sous forme de réflexion.
Well, in fact, it is a peculiar question. It's done by establishment, by institution. Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Can you please repeat the question? It was not clear. So after understanding the results of the tracer studies, are they done by institution or by sector? Do you think that one of the reasons why the results of the insertion studies are not used correctly? Could this be a reason why? We cannot hear the lady, unfortunately. There is So the results of insertion are defined by sector, not by establishment, exception made for some low capacity institutions. this is sure that it does influence the insertion results, but these establishments do not have a very high level of independence. They are always run by the supervisor, and therefore we have crossed the studies carried out at the establishment level, and this has really done very interesting elements concerning the matching and the training offer. I agree, this provides more result, but because the establishment independently run and they can act on the vocational training offer. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, so now I would like to propose to have a short break so we can recharge our batteries, have some coffee or tea, or I will have some water, and then continue with a little poll in 5 minutes. So please be on time. We will have a 5 minutes break. We will return at 12 o'clock Italian time, but anyway, it will be a full hour. So in 5 minutes, we will get back. Five minutes break. Okay, colleagues. So thank you for being back on time. Let's continue with our webinar. Just a little comment. You can continue posting your questions also for our Moroccan speakers. In case we do not have time to take them during the webinar, we will continue this discussion on open space on our thematic platform. We will send you instructions how to register for this platform in case you are not members already. So keep writing your questions. No questions will remain unanswered. Okay, so now that we are very well immersed into the topic of graduate tracking, we would like to connect to the experiences and practices of our participants, of our audience in various countries. So we want to do a little poll. We would like to offer a small questionnaire with just 2 questions. You will see it now on your screens. Okay, so we kindly ask you to respond to these 2 questions. Do you collect information from VET graduates in your country? And if you collect information from VET graduates, for what purposes do you use it? So you can just, you see the poll on your screen, so you can just respond to these questions. You can select the answers.
And you can scroll down to see the options for question 2. You have four options for question 2. So scroll down the screen to see them.
We will leave a couple of minutes for you to read carefully, to think and to respond. And later on, we will comment. Okay, we will project the results of this poll, and later on we will get back to these results. Okay, so we will keep the poll going for half a minute still, if our participants want to respond. Okay, we have, my colleagues are telling me that we have 18 answers. So maybe if our participants still would like to respond, you still have 10 seconds. Okay, so now we are closing the poll, and my colleague Chiara will help to project the results now. So let's see. Monir, we don't hear you. Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry, I saw that you were speaking. Okay, so you can see the responses. I think they're very telling. But we will get back to these responses later on. Thank you for taking part in this poll. So now we would like to continue with our with the core of our webinar, And I would like now to pass the floor to Herman Scholten from the Netherlands, from the Ministry of Education of the Netherlands. So Herman, we are looking forward to hear about the Dutch experience. Over to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And at the moment, I think we don't see your slides. We see your screen, but not the slides yet.
Okay, we have some technical difficulties.
Okay, but no problem, we will resolve this. I think we can share your slides, no problem.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
Yes, my name is Herman Scholten. I work at the Ministry of Education, Culture and Science. Can put on slide 2 if you please. Do you have slide 2 for me?
Okay, yes.
Like I said, I'm a program manager, secondary FET. I want to address 2 basic questions. How do we track our graduates after they have completed the FET? And what do we do with the information? I will focus especially on the transition to the labor market and career thereafter. And we also track our students during their school career, but I won't go into that. Next slide, please.
Okay, we are trying to change the slides, but
it's just a push on the button.
Yes. Okay, we'll try to exit from the full screen modality. Maybe it will help. Okay. We have a small technical issue now for a second because we have our screen locked. We have our screen blocked.
Yes, but
okay,
there
now
it is.
It's okay.
Okay, thank you. Yes, graduate tracking in the Netherlands. I'm going to tell you something very shortly about the data. We have registered data in Holland. It's a database with all our students and graduates. And we have asked the Central Bureau of Statistics to merge these all these students with the Social Security and tax registers. So we can actually track our graduates for 14 years after graduation on the labor market, but also if they are on social benefits, for instance. Because it's one-on-one, we know it of every student, every graduate, we can present the results, the outcomes on a national level, but also on a regional level and to the school level. So we know from every school what the employment rates of the graduates are, what they earn and things like that. Even down to teaching teams per type of vet training. So for instance, if you're a major school like the vet school in Amsterdam, which has 30,000 students, we can go down to the teaching teams, for instance, in nursing, and say, well, the employment rate of your students is 85%, for instance, and they earn on average, say, 10 euros per hour. That does cover a lot, but not all. So we have next to that a survey, a graduate survey, not only graduates, I should say, but also school leavers. So those without diploma. And we gather all kind of qualitative stuff, like in which kind of occupation are you, measures on satisfaction, with both the training they have had and the match with the job they are currently having, but also on the job itself. And in this way, we can address things like skill, vertical and horizontal mismatch. This is an annual questionnaire based on those registers I mentioned before. So it's carried out by our Central Bureau of Statistics. It has 100% coverage, so all graduates are being asked. It has a response rate of 23% at the moment. That was gradually declining because of an overload of questions being put to graduates, people in Holland whatsoever. And so we're currently trying a pilot for smartphone because it's also additional. We know a lot from the register data. So the survey data on the graduates is fairly limited. So we tried the smartphone and it also raised our response rates quite markedly because the group uses smartphones very intensely. Next slide, please. Yes, how does it work? Graduate tracking. We have on the left-hand side, the educational database, which records things like gender type of fair training, the grades they have, but also the address, the region they have attended school. It is merged with the Social Security and tax registration, and we started in 2006 by matching those two. And so we can track them down to 2020. One can see different status. Most of them, in general, about 85% of the school leavers, the graduates, are into a job. Some of them go back the same year to school. And we have all kinds of data on them: wages, contractual hours, type of contract, and economic sector. It's hard evidence. It's from the tax registers and the employment registers. So it's really, we know a lot about them. And because of the fact that we also have the tax registrations, we also have the ones who are self-employed or entrepreneur. And of course the unemployed and those on welfare. So we know their status throughout time. And for instance, if John, or in this case maybe Ahmed, is going back to school in 2012 to become an entrepreneur, to have a specialized education on level 4 upper secondary FET. We know that, and we see what type of training he does, and we can also follow him down to 2020 when he becomes self-employed. And maybe in 2020 with Corona unemployed. I shouldn't have said that, but anyway, next slide. I'm a bit hesitant to do this one because it's the transitions in the Dutch educational system. And believe me, it's much more complicated than this one. But I want you to focus on the left-hand side. It's we started primary education, then 94% of a cohort of students goes to the lower secondary education, the first 2 years. At the age of already 12, 13, maybe 14, they have to decide whether they go to upper general secondary education or pre-vocational education. And as you can see, half of our students, the 45% and the 4%, go to upper secondary vocational education. So about 500,000 of our students attend upper secondary vocational education. They're on several levels. Level 1 is really tiny. Levels 4, 3, and 2 are much bigger. And you can also go from level 2 to 3 or 4. The measurement is on the blue arrows. Those are the school leavers with diploma. And we also survey and monitor the school leavers without a diploma. So we have both of them. This goes for the higher vocational and scientific education as well. We have surveys and monitoring on that as well. But I focus on those 500,000 students. Next slide, please. Okay, back to life, back to reality, policy relevance of it all. Yes, we use it in various ways. Can you push the button one more time for the policy in the S there? Another time. Okay, there it is. We use it for information on choice of study. Can you push it once more? For secondary VET, we have, for instance, a site which aids our students in making the choices. So all the information we gather, we also provide to the students. Can you push the button one more time? Yes, and the same goes for higher vocational education. So in this way, our students, before they enter FET training, can make a more reliable, more ascertained decisions on what type of training they want to. They also know the chance for employment, the employment rate. They also know what they are likely to earn once they're finished. So they got a lot of information. The chance that they get a job, we see from our surveys that they don't adhere to that. But we see that especially the wage information does have an effect on their choice behavior. We all use this information for transparency about the system, so that everyone can make a well-informed choice, including the labor market perspective. But we also use this information regarding Parliament. Can you push the button one more time? Yes, thank you. For instance, for our policy on labor market relevance, how relevant are those vocational trainings? We can, per vocational training, we have information about the employment rates, how they're going through time, and what they earn, what type of contract, is it a steady contract or a 0-hour wage contract? So we know a lot about it. But because we can also address those questions in the region, we can also give information to schools, for instance. Is this the right training in the right place? If we have figures with very low employment rates, maybe you shouldn't provide that specific training because there is not enough demand for it in your regional labor market. And we have some legal, I must say, indicators signaling potential problems. I will come to that in a minute. Next slide, please. Yes, uses by stakeholders. Well, one for one, schools, of course. We give them high quality information for school policies, strategic plans, but also for legal requirements, like I said before, the efficiency of educational supply. Of course, the municipalities and regions, for instance, information on mismatch, whether the schools provide the trainings necessary for their regional economy. And the municipalities and regions can also address the schools on that. Of course, like I said already, students and the choice of study. Next, please. The national stakeholders, like I said, policy development and monitoring. We use the indicators also for government budget accountability. So when we address Parliament, we also use these data. Next one, please. And of course, the international stakeholders, like where we are now, the EU, the OECD, but also for scientific research. It's the database is with the Central Bureau of Statistics, and licensed research bureaus can have access to it, be it that they don't actually see the individual data. They cannot recognize persons. Next slide, please. Yes. One of the major issues, policy issues, is on the labor market relevance. We have a legal requirement. If employment rates of studies drop below a minimum, that's say an employment rate of 70%, schools and sectors are addressed by the ministry. There's a talk, we talk to all schools, we have 60 of them, with varying from 5,000 to 30,000 students, and we talk to everyone during the year. And if all is well, it's a nice talk. It's not. It's sometimes a different talk. In some FET trainings, it led to a self-imposed freezing of number of students. We saw, for instance, in media and creative industries, that there were a lot of students choosing those trainings, but there was not much of a labor market perspective. So we addressed the schools, we addressed their organizations, their representing organization. You got to do something about this, or we have to do something about it. So they self-imposed a freezing of the number of students with a gradual decline in the future, so that demand and supply are in better, more in equilibrium. There were some trainings which had an employment rate of 50%. So a year after study, after their graduation, sorry, they have still hadn't got a job. So that's quite bad. So it was really necessary to do something about it. In Holland, we have a declining number of students due to demographic reasons, and also some of the employment rates have dropped for some schools. So schools themselves use the information to concentrate their trainings and make some specialization among institutions in the same region. Some of them even decided to merge parts of the education in some colleges. And we also see that based on the data, new studies have emerged replacing almost redundant ones. Next slide, please. Yes, what kind of policy information do we have? Here are some labor market outcomes. This is one on unemployment in 2011, 2017. I hadn't time to update this one, so we can update it to 2019. Its secondary fetch, you can see, for instance, that, and this is on a national level, but again, we can do this on every level. We can do it for every school, in fact. We see that work-based learning, we have a dual system like Morocco has. Morocco has with work-based learning and school-based learning. And one can see that work-based learning has very low unemployment rates, even during the crisis, the financial crisis in the years 2011 to 2014, even lower than, for instance, higher vocational education. On the other hand, you can also see the problem with our level 2 students, which have been affected severely by the crisis, and we suspect that they, again, in this corona crisis, will suffer badly. So we have special programs in place now to aid them. Next slide, please. It's almost the last one. We can provide these differences between field of study for all schools on a national level, regional level, whatever. So, and we do. We provide the schools and the regions with these data. As you can see in this one, I won't go into detail. You can see, for instance, that the gross hourly wage, the one on the right, is on average about 12 euros. But in, for instance, level 1 and level 2, it's substantially lower, while, for instance, in healthcare, it's the highest. And one can see that also in school-based SET, the students who say, the graduates who say, we're on level or high is about 75%. That's the first column. And one can see that it's slightly higher for general secondary FET. That means including work-based learning. Actually, work-based learning lifts up the secondary FET figures compared to the school-based FET figures. So this is an example of how we use those data and address schools to perform. So next slide, please. So that was it for me, at least for my presentation. I've gone through it quite quickly. And I hope I have provided you with some eye-openers.
Thank you very much, Herman. Thank you very much for your great presentation, for letting us know how graduate tracking is implemented, but also how it is used, and very importantly, what concrete actions are taken as a result of graduate tracking. Okay, so now it's time for questions, colleagues. So I'm turning again to Eva and to Munir. Do we have questions from our participants?
Thank you, Nadia. Yes, we have. So I will, as in the first case, I will try to collect several information from the chat. If we don't manage to answer all of them, we will continue on our open space. So first question is a more technical one. You presented some information about the survey, and you also pointed to the response rate, which is rather low. So the question is, does this low response rate allow you to draw conclusions, or are you concerned about it or not, and why? Herman, we cannot hear you.
No, we still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I said we're not worried about it because we have a very large survey. It's 100,000 students who actually are being approached, and 23% still is 23,000. And we know all their background details from the registers, so we can also we know the non-response, and we can, or actually the Central Bureau of Statistics can make a good weighing of the sample. 23% is on average in Holland. It's not considered low, but it was dropping, so we thought we have to do something about it. So we started using the smartphone, and we see that by using the smartphone, the numbers are going up again. So no, not really worried. But we had to do something about it in the end.
Okay.
I hope it answers your question.
I think it does. Thank you. So another question would be from Faiza. How do you determine training mismatches, and how do you use them?
Yes, we determine training mismatches by the employment rate. If it's very low, and we, like I said, we have data on all the training. So, and we have had a research bureau, the Research Center for Education in Holland, in Limburg, in Maastricht, and they made a study about several years, which kind of studies lag behind in kind of employment rate. And also, it's not only employment rate, we also look at graduation rates. And it must be over a period of time. It's not 1 year dropping below the required number, but it's for several years. And then we address the schools themselves. But we have also a survey, and graduates actually tell something about whether they see if their training has been successful in helping them be successful on the labor market. And those percentages can be also be connected to the school. So we provide them with this information, and we started a discussion, a debate on how to improve it. It's not that we say, oh, you should skip that training altogether. But it happens that they skip, but it's mostly voluntary. We have also a committee, an independent committee, which studies these things, because there are also these questions among our FET schools. So one provides a training which is very similar to the one next door, or in the same region. So they decide upon what to do with that. And make if it's not solved right away between the schools themselves and the committee, then they advise the minister on how to act. So yes, we use several sources to address these questions, especially also with the qualitative aspect of it. So also the graduation rates also come into play. Okay.
Thank you. That was very comprehensive. I have one question, which maybe also bit provoking. So to what extent do you think that the tracer studies can tell us something about the impact of VET programs, impact on the economy, impact on the employment? Is it, do you think it's a unique and the one standing tool that can be used to measure impact, or it's not sufficient?
I think it's a very powerful tool, actually. It took some time for the schools to adjust to it, to get used to it, but it opens a discussion, not only between the ministry and the schools themselves, but also within the region. Do we provide the trainings that are necessary for our local or regional economy? Because the economy in Amsterdam is totally different than, for instance, in the northern part of our country, which has much more agriculture, much more industry, and Amsterdam is very much focused on ICT, on financial services, on tourism, like things like that. So a totally different labor market. So you have to adhere and adjust your trainings to the type of labor market you have, and constant feedback on how the graduates are doing and what are, for instance, what the position of the weaker students are on the labor market, in which type of contracts they land. Well, it's very important for them and for us as well to constantly adjust our trainings, constantly adjust the portfolio of set trainings we provide. And we have a special institute for that, which on a yearly basis looks at all the trainings we provide. We provide about 500 of them, and looks at if they need to be adjusted. And they use these figures as well. We share them with everybody, so it's not a secret. The data of the schools are published by the Central Bureau of Statistics. That was some getting used to, I must admit, but they do, and now everybody is used to that.
Thank you. I will now pass the floor to Munir to pick one or two questions from the French-speaking colleagues.
Yes, thank you, Ayman, for the presentation. Actually, there are plenty of questions. We will not be able to address them all, so I will pick up a couple of questions, and then we'll see how to address them through the ETF Open Space. So the first question is the following: are there decisions taken at national level based on the results of the tracing studies, or it is up to the schools to address that?
Sorry, I missed the part of the question.
Well, the question is the following. From your presentation, we understand that you provide recommendations to schools, yes, and they take decisions. So the question is, are there decisions taken at national level, or you just provide recommendations to schools and they have to adjust?
Now, we certainly have policies on national level. Like I said, we have a legislation on this. So if schools drop below a certain employment rate, the 70%, we not only recommend, but we strongly advise, and if that's not sufficient, we go beyond that. We seldom have to really close trainings. The schools themselves sort these problems out. It's, I think, a typical Dutch way of doing it. So we call it a kind of social model. We do a lot by talking, but actually there's a legal base for it. So in the end, the minister can decide whether or not certain vocational FET trainings are provided by schools in general, but also in specific cases. So we have a policy on that. We also use it, for instance, we have some problems with ethnic minorities getting jobs. So we also address these questions, again, with employers as well as the schools themselves, to get those employment rates of ethnic minorities up. So we use that, and we have also policies on that. And for instance, work-based learning, as you could see, it's very effective for a group that doesn't like school that much. They have high employment rates and they earn quite good. So, but it's not popular at all. So we have special policies to both on the side of the employers by giving them subsidies, as well as campaigns for students to attract them to those kinds of studies. So yes, we do have national policies, but in the Dutch case, it's also very much, we use a lot of negotiation and talking to get what we like to see.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that we will stop it here, because we still have only 10 minutes and we still have one short presentation. Thanks a lot again, Herman, for the presentation, and thank you to all the participants for their lot of questions that they have asked, and we are very sorry that we cannot address them during this webinar. But as Nadeja said, on ETF Open Space, we will try to continue the discussion. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nadia.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Munir. And I am passing the floor to my colleague Eva, who will talk about indicators and how they can support employability and responsiveness of VET.
Thank you, Nadia. First of all, I will comment shortly on the results from the poll. You cannot see them now, but I still remember that 74% of the respondents said that yes, there is an existing tracer study or the data collection from graduates, and it's done on a regular basis. But as we could see that 5% of the respondents said no, there is no such tool, and 21% say that there is such a tool, but it only is implemented on ad hoc basis. So it doesn't support the systematic and systemic monitoring. As we could expect, where such data are collected, they are mainly used to adjust the training provision and to review the curricula. So this is in line about what we know, also from the ETF partner countries. And now, to frame our discussion, I would like to move to a short presentation that let's say would like to give some last input with regard to the monitoring and the indicators that can be used to monitor outcomes. So why are we focusing actually on the monitoring of graduates today? Because such indicators are extremely important for the VET monitoring, so for the monitoring of quality and quality assurance arrangements. Based on the discussion done within the ECAVET, which is the community of practice that promotes European collaboration with the aim to develop and improve the quality assurance in VET, there is an agreement on a limited set of indicators that should be used and data should be collected to really monitor the system, to monitor the quality, and to be able to tell a story. Such indicators refer to different parts of the system. So they refer to inputs, processes, outputs, and outcomes. And the tracer study data are extremely important to tell us something about the outcomes. That's what you could hear today. And you could see how powerful actually the data could be, both for the system level and the providers level. So some information on the proposed indicators. So the indicators related to the outcomes that are considered to be the key are two. First, it's the placement rate in VET programs. the sub-indicators that are provided or that are agreed within the ECAVET network are the destination of VET learners after a certain point in time after the graduation, and also the share of the employed learners after the graduation. So what you would like to know, and this is something that you can collect through the tracer studies, is what your graduates are doing after they leave the school. The second indicator relates to the utilization of acquired skills at the workplace. So here we are not interested anymore in what the graduates are doing after they leave the school, but also what they are doing. So the sub-indicators that are agreed within the network are the information on occupation obtained by individuals after the graduation, to see, for example, whether they work in the fields that are related to the field of studies. And the second sub-indicator is the satisfaction rate of individuals or employers with acquired skills. So to what extent they believe that the obtained skills during the education phase fit to the needs on the labor market. Both indicators, as they refer to also outcomes, they can be used to see to what extent the training provision respond to the labor market needs, and also to help to see what changes in the training provision can be introduced. In both examples from Morocco and Netherlands, you could see that this information can be really important and powerful in changing the provision and helping the provision to align with the labor market. My last information that I would like to share with you, those information are based on the feedback from the ETF Forum. We could see during our session and meetings with colleagues that measuring outcomes is important and extremely relevant, but it's often very challenging. So within the ETF Forum, a limited number of countries actually collect such data and report on outcome indicators. And this is mainly connected with the fact that you need surveys or some specific registered data that you can connect together. And this means that you need resources, human, financial, but also technical and analytical knowledge. And as already mentioned by Morocco, the users must be also able to interpret the data and be able to use them. And this can be done both at the provider level and at the system level. So this is my short intervention, and thank you, Nadia.
Thank you very much, Eva. So I think we are heading towards the end of our webinar, and we have touched upon so many interesting arguments, and I think now it's time for conclusions. So I would like to invite Keith Broomfit in the UK to join our discussion and to highlight the key issues that have arisen from this webinar. And I would like to say to those colleagues who have not joined our previous webinars that Keith Broomfit or has been the chief advisor for the European Network for Quality Assurance in VET for many years, and he has been collaborating with the ETF Quality Assurance Forum since its launch. So we are happy now to pass the floor to Keith.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. And just I said a little context first. As you know, the European Union has a recommendation on graduate tracking, which covers VET and higher education. And the Commission has an expert group of 60 people looking at how to implement graduate tracking. I'm going to explain the 5 issues that they are looking at, because I think these 5 issues were part of our discussion with the examples of Morocco and from the Netherlands. So there's 5 issues. The first one, they are looking at how do you use both administrative data with survey or tracer data. The administrative data is often very quantitative, as we heard from the Netherlands, but the survey data is often qualitative and impressions of satisfaction from employers or learners. So we hear a lot of that from Morocco and the Netherlands. So that's the first issue, combining administrative and survey data. The second big issue was, what do you do with school leavers? In a lot of systems, there's very little data on those who leave early, and that causes some difficulties with the data. So that's the second issue. The third issue, and I saw a question in chat on this, is how do you deal with mobile learners, people who move abroad after completion? The brain gain issue and the brain loss issue is very significant in some countries. So the experts are looking at that. And again, I saw questions on that. The fourth issue to mention is the response rate with surveys. In some countries, the response rates are very high, and that is a cultural issue because learners are happy to share data and information and respond. In other countries, the response rates are very, very low because learners are not comfortable providing data or information to either the training providers or the ministry. So when there's really difficult cultural issues about surveys, countries are looking at using administrative data as a way of collecting information. And finally, in terms of the expert group, it's very clear that the support that individual countries want and need to support graduate tracking is very, very variable. The support a country like the Netherlands needs from the European level is probably very small. And there are other countries like Finland, like Germany, who need very little support. There are other countries who need quite a lot of support in Europe because they have no administrative data, they have limited surveys, and so they need different support. So the European Commission has set up a 2-year support program for member states and EEA countries, which is based on individual needs. So the next step is 2 years of support on developing graduate tracking. And then finally, once that is over, we are expecting the expert group's recommendations, which will be completed this month, to be considered by the European Commission and decisions made on how to implement a European-wide graduate tracking system. But a European-wide system is probably based on every country doing their own thing with some common elements. And that is the very big debate about the amount that is common and the amount that is completely different in individual countries. So that's the European context, and the discussions and the examples from Morocco and the Netherlands were very clear that countries are dealing with exactly the same issues in the ETF Forum region, as well as the same issues that are being addressed by the colleagues in the member states and the European Commission's expert group. So I'm happy to take any questions if people want to. ask anything on the European process on graduate tracking?
Thank you very much, Keith. Thank you very much for drawing our attention to these 5 important issues. I think we are now heading really towards the end, and we should close our webinar. So I think, I'm looking at Eva, but I think we still have some questions that we have not managed to answer, but we will look into them after the webinar. They will not be lost. And we will copy any questions that have remained unanswered to open space. So you will hear from us probably in the coming days, or tomorrow already probably, on how to register on open space so you can continue participating in the discussion. So I would now like to thank all our speakers and all our participants for being here today. Thank you for being so active. And we will see each other in our next webinar still this year. So thank you very much. And thank you very much to our interpreters too. And goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye.